Good afternoon, and the warmest welcome. We're coming to you live from Abuja, Nigeria. We're at the 16th NESG Summit, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. The theme today is Nigeria at 50. As you know, in early October, Nigeria celebrated its Jubilee year. And what many Nigerians are asking ahead of the elections in year 2011 is whether or not there are sufficiently enough visionary progressive leaders to take this country forward. The theme for this afternoon is the challenge of visionary leadership and good governance. Now, prior to this broadcast, we saw a documentary that raised a few issues about Nigeria, the road and the journey it's traveled over the last 50 years, many lamenting the horrible history of military rule, the terrible epitaph of corruption that's often labeled against the Nigerians, and hoping for a new way, especially as Nigeria has reached this milestone of 50 years. Now, the producer of the documentary is going to co-host the special broadcast on CNBC Africa with me. His name is Charles Aniagolu. He's the CEO of Spurs Creations, and I'd like to introduce you to him now. Charles.
Thanks very much indeed, Lerato. And this month, as Nigeria clocks 50 years as an independent nation, the country is confronted with major economic and social problems, as well as political. Nigerians at all levels say they're worse off than they were at independence. Many express dissatisfaction with the achievement of their leaders in the past 5 decades, and there are worries about the country and the development prospects for the future.
All right, so as I said to you earlier on, get used to Charles's face. He's going to be with us throughout this entire special broadcast coming to you from Nigeria. Now, what this is essentially is a dialogue, an interface between business, civil society, and the leaders of Nigeria, the executive, the decision makers, who believe that they are in a position to chart a new course for Nigeria into the next 50 years. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists, an esteemed group of leaders within the country, starting off with the first and the most prominent of our guests, His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Dr. Goodluck Jonathan. Thank you very much for being with us today. I'd also like to introduce to you Nigeria's Minister of Finance, the Honorable Olusegun Aganga. Thank you very much for being here with us. And we also have the Honorable Minister of National Planning, Dr. Shamusuddeen Usman. Thank you for being here with us.
And also with us today is the distinguished former Chief Justice of Nigeria, Alfa Belgore, who's sitting across from me. And next to him is Mr. Bello Maccido, who's a captain of industry, the MD of Legacy Pensions Nigeria Limited. Welcome to the program. And of course, to my immediate right, Mr. Mazi Ohuabunwa, who's chairman of the National Economic Summit Group, the people who are organizing this today. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for being here. Mr. President, your vision for Nigeria.
Thank you. Let me also join you to commend that short documentary that you presented. At least that will be the basis of our discussion this afternoon. To be precise, if you ask me for my vision is for us to have a nation that all Nigerians will be proud of. Because listening to the discussions in that short documentary, you really see that people are losing confidence in the nation for some reasons that probably along the line we're going to discuss. A nation that all of us will be proud of. A nation built on unity, that all of us believe in ourselves and that we are one person. A unity that can encourage solid, sound economy based on solid education so that you can move further. And where you will have the basic infrastructure like power, road, and others to support the private sector. But for the economy to grow, it is the private sector that will drive it. And security that will encourage investment locally and foreign direct investment. So that, and for that to happen, you also need to build institutions, the civil service, the judiciary, the legislature, and other organs of the executive to do what they're supposed to do, just like we're talking about corruption, solid institutions. And for us as a nation to play our role globally so that we, as one of the leading African countries, will be recognized that when a Nigerian wants to travel to any part of this world, it's not subjected to all kinds of humiliations when it's applying for visa because of our own challenges. That's my vision for this country.
Mr. President, how much of that vision how much of that vision is focused on African traditions? Because there are people who suggest that Nigeria's crisis has emanated from the fact that people have deviated from their original, who they are originally. How much of this is dependent? How much of your vision, is dependent on African traditions?
Well, even if you listen to the documentary, you really see that people believe that probably, wrongly or rightly, that even our governance structures, like now we are on a presidential system, very expensive system. You borrow from the United States of America. You conduct elections every 4 years. Very, very expensive. Of course, the debate is even the amount of money we are currently spending only on voters' registration. We are not talking about logistics of the election, security of the elections. So a number of people feel that probably if we had taken our own structure based on a tradition, take for the local government system, even during the colonial days, where maybe like in northern Nigeria, where the traditional leadership is highly respected and recognized, and they manage their people, collect tax, and it helps the colonial officers to run the country well. That if we have developed, our modern policies is developed on that principle, probably it would have been something somewhat indigenous to us, and probably it would have helped us to develop. Maybe you compare to some of the Asian countries where the countries are still ruled by the kings. The whole country, the whole resources of the country belongs to the kingdom. And you see that they are developing. The central bank is almost like the personal bank of the king. But they are developing because it is based on their own tradition. And they build on that. But probably the accusation is that, we came at independence, we came with a parliamentary system, try to imitate the British structure. After that, now moving to presidential system, shifting to the American tradition, a bit alien to us, without modification to suit our own circumstances. Maybe a factor, but I will prefer the political scientists to do that analysis. But for us, the vision that I have, whether it's based on African way of doing things, of course, over the years, we have changed significantly. Those of us who came from traditional societies, we have changed significantly. So anybody who even think about going back to what we used to do before, you cannot succeed. But it has to do with creating a system where people, I don't like to use the word corruption, a system where people will be less greedy. The greatest problem we have is probably greed. Not even it's a factor. If corruption is a factor of greed. If you listen to Richard Dowden, who talks about compare Nigeria and probably some of the Asian countries, and talks about the military rulership, and of course everybody laughed when he said that there, yes, the military stole, but they did not steal everything. The assumption is here everything was stolen. I may not quite agree with that, but that gets to tell you the level of the greed factor. It's not just the corruption issues, but the greed, where somebody wants to take what belongs to everybody, even what you don't need. See, these are the challenges we have, which we are trying to fix as a nation.
Okay, I'd like to invite the former Chief Justice to say a few words about the vision for Nigeria that's being articulated, an ethos of excellence and integrity. Often we're told that in Nigeria, the judiciary's been complicit in running this country down. The rule of law has never been respected in Nigeria.
Yes, we have a problem with the Constitution itself, as the President has said. The Constitution is very alien to us. I'll give you an example. Let's say in Zaria, if the people are dissatisfied with what the politicians are doing, they can stone the governor, they can physically attack him. But when the emir of Zaria comes out and says, my people, please go home, the problem will be solved, they obey him. Then we have neglected these people from our constitution. And that's where we are in the present problem. It's not our constitution. It's very alien to us. The procedure we use in court, very wrong. The British had it before 1914. We are still adhering to the procedures. The result is that a case that will take 6 months at most is taking 6 years. We are conducting elections. Election tribunal will come. We gather 5 wise men from other states, bring them to your state. If a person is corrupt, wherever you bring him from, he will still be corrupt. In 1964, that was the last election conducted before the coup, the first coup in Nigeria. The longest election petition was about 4.5 months. That was Okotiebo in Warri. But what we have now is 6 years. We are still there. The member that is not elected, according to the court, will still be there for about 3.5 years. Then after 3.5 years, they say he's not the one lawfully elected. That is very wrong, and we are having judiciary getting into trouble or being distrusted. The procedures are very wrong. The procedure coined by the British before 1914, when they were trying every case with jury, is what we are still using. It's very, very wrong.
I'm going to come in here very quickly.
Yes.
Direct this question again to Mr. President. Corruption, you've talked about that in government, and high unemployment has helped to create cynicism among the youth in Nigeria. And many people who are socially disadvantaged feel that they don't have any stake at all in this country. What is your vision to inspire an upsurge in patriotism among such people?
When you talk about issue of unemployment and corruption, they are not exactly the same. But I agree with you that listening to those who made comments, it shows people who are a bit frustrated, as if they don't even have hopes. But if you listen to the people who made their comments, luckily, a number of them were very senior government functionaries. They served as ministers, served as vice presidents, served as heads of states and presidents of this country, and also talked about the institutions and the leadership failure, which is okay. But for you, I always say that when you talk about employment, you don't create jobs with a magic wand. You have to create an environment, an economy that the private sector can employ. There's nowhere in the world that government employs everybody. And that is why we talked about stability, which is a key factor in economic growth of a nation. And that is why this time around, from the next budget, our capital budget now, the planning ministry will play a key role. Before this time, it's only the budget office under the Ministry of Finance that plan capital budgets. So in most cases, your budgeting procedure does not tally with your plans. And the planning ministry cannot enforce or compel the budget office or the departments of government to follow. But now we say no. If our vision document, which has been properly articulated, of course in the presentation, of course the Honorable Minister of Planning explained, for us to follow this vision 2020, that means that that vision document must be followed to the letter. You may find it difficult to implement 100% because you get challenges as you progress, but at least up to 80% implemented, especially relating to our capital budget. It is not like before this time. Maybe I am from a tiny village called Otwoke. Because I'm the president today, I'll decide to go and build an airport there. Even if the next airport is only 10 kilometers away, I'll build an airport. Immediately I leave office, nobody uses that airport. So those are the problems we had as a nation because we had no stable government. And that is the issue, even if you compare Nigeria to most of these other countries, it is the very unstable system that we passed through. There was no consistency in planning. The longest period we had was Gowon's administration was about 9 years. 3 years was spent in fighting a civil war. After the civil war, it thinks about more of rehabilitating a war-torn country, making sure that people are united. Up to this extent, Nigerians don't even believe, just like the governor of Cross River State made that comment, people believe more in their ethnic nationalities. People still see themselves like, I belong to this group, I belong to that group, I belong to that group.
Mr. President, I think we need to take this conversation forward and just get back to the topic at hand, the challenges of visionary leadership. Really trying to inculcate a new consciousness. The president wants to see a different country guided and governed by a different set of principles. It's not just the responsibility of the state, it's also the responsibility of citizens. Mr. Maccido, your views in terms of the role that business can play. We've already heard that business is almost captive in the sense that you bid for government tenders, and so when there's wrongdoing or any malpractice and malfeasance, again, business is complicit.
Let me just first of all say that I'm here in my capacity as the chairman of the Pension Fund Operators Association of Nigeria. And by that position, I'm actually the spokesman for the industry. Definitely business can assist in terms of guiding Nigeria on the way forward. If I give an example with the pension industry, where I am, 5 years ago, before the advent of the new pension scheme, pension assets in the country were very, very small. And because of that, it's difficult to pull long-term sources of funding that you need to invest long-term. The nature of the financial system we have today is such that a lot of our assets are on the short term. And because of that, lending also to many sectors of the economy tend to also be short term. So the creation of the pension industry has created what I call a platform for pulling long-term savings that can be channeled also into long-term investment. So through that kind of process of creating a platform for long-term investments, actually the private sector, particularly working with the pension industry, can assist in moving the level of investments and by extension also level of economic activity within the country.
Right. Let's get another perspective from business. Mr. Ohuabunwa, can you just give us a sense of what you would like to see the government do to create an enabling environment for business? Because all these jobs, youth employment, dealing with the despair of the people will come if people are living well in this country.
You can be more correct. And I think the president has said that it is not essentially the business of government to employ. It is the business of the private sector. And the private sector's needs are not too many. We need an ordered society where there is law and order that government has the instruments to enforce. We need security of lives and property. We need an environment that is open, where resources can come in and go out according to the rule of law. Those three things are critical to bring funding and to bring investment. It's investment that creates the jobs. Government haven't done this basic thing. All that is left to do is to create incentives that will attract investment. The kind of incentive that's driving investments to Dubai, to Macedonia, to all those parts of the world that one thought were places you wouldn't like to go. Nigeria is a place people would like to go. What we need is to be sure that when people arrive here from the airport, they are safe. When they do business, they can guarantee that the court will enforce any disputes and that there is a motivation for investment. These are the things that we're asking for, and we believe that government has the resources and the ability to make sure that the laws of this nation are obeyed by everyone, to make sure that people are secure and safe. This is what we're asking for. And if they did so, and then the private sector came forth with a proper corporate governance structures, obey the rules of the country, and if they didn't obey the rules of the country, are held responsible. Everybody needs to be held accountable, private, public, NGO. The moment that is done, I think the desire of the president will become evident. There will be a lot of investments, and business will grow, and as business grows, wealth is created, more people are employed, poverty disappears.
Charles?
I'd like to direct this question to the Minister of Finance. At last year's economic summit, the president, who was then the vice president, said, and I quote, "If the economy is growing we expect poverty to be declining, and there must be a way to correlate and make it more meaningful for the ordinary people, unquote. Have you since found a way to make this correlation?
Thank you very much, Charles. And that's a very relevant question. But when they had this event last year, I don't think at the time Nigerians and the global economic community had the time to actually understand the impact of the global economic crisis. If they did, then you'll be looking at it differently. I want to start with that. I want to start with that because that was the main thing that was discussed at the World Bank meeting last week. The issue of poverty and unemployment is a global issue today, which affects every country. And that's the fallout from the global economic crisis. So we're not different from any other nation. That's number one. Having said that, let's look at the Nigerian situation. With the Nigerian situation, you need to understand the reason for the level of poverty, what you call poverty, and the level of unemployment. And the good thing is that one of the mandates which we were given by the economic management team, by the president, is to focus on job creation. And what we did was to consult widely, first of all. And I think I started with the NESG when I came to your forum.
Correct.
And we consulted widely with the industry, with manufacturers, with the financial services, with the banking sector, everyone. Because we believe in a very, very strong, effective partnership between the private and the government sector to resolve this and to move the economy forward. And they told us a number of things which we, as a country, we need to do. But first of all, let's understand the reason why we have that level of unemployment and poverty. Now, you have that because of four main reasons. One was the fallout of the financial crisis and the fallout of our own boom and bust, credit boom and bust situation, which is peculiar to Nigeria. And therefore, that starved revenue or income or capital from capital markets, the banking sector and all that, and that had an impact on the manufacturing sector. The second is not just short term, it's more medium to long term. And that has to do with the relevance of not just the banking sector, but the relevance of the educational system to the economy. And what we want to do is build the economy on a structurally sounder foundation, which means that we have to understand the causes, not the effect, and deal with all the causes, and we're dealing with all the causes. The first step is we set up a committee with most members of the private sector, actually led by the private sector, to look at the issue of job creation and to come up with a master plan on job creation. That committee will submit their report next week. The second is to promote entrepreneurship, which you've talked about a few times. You'll see a program in the next 2 weeks on how we unlock entrepreneurship and grow the middle class, and gradually, and then go to the lower income. So there's a strategy for that, which we'll unveil within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
All right, we'll be unraveling those strategies shortly. Just we'd like some input from the Minister of National Planning. The President refers to Vision 2020, not just for Nigeria as a global economy within the emerging market space, but also as a program to elicit a different way in which business is conducted and in which Nigerians see themselves. Can you just articulate that vision for us?
Well, I'm happy you had the Chief Executive of Nigeria Incorporated himself, that is the President, talking about this vision. And I think in the documentary, we saw the question of the lack of a national vision that is shared by everybody. People ask me, what's the difference really between Nigeria and Indonesia, Malaysia, India that have all been mentioned? The difference is that they had national visions that were understood by everybody. If you go to Indonesia, Malaysia today and stop a taxi driver and say, what's your vision? What's the country's vision? He'll be able to tell you in a brief way. So the difference is that at least now we have a national vision, and you heard that the #1 citizen of the country believes in this vision. We're trying to communicate it across the whole country and to show that if we are actually true to this vision, then the potential for development in the country is going to be that huge. And we're trying to anchor it, in fact, in law by having a piece of legislation that makes it compulsory for this government and all subsequent governments to abide by that vision until we achieve it by 2020 or earlier. So I do believe that that is really a very good foundation for the future development of the country.
All right, that's going to lead us into a discussion focusing on the economy when we return after this break. Do stay tuned. You're watching a special broadcast coming to you live from Abuja, Nigeria. It's the presidential dialogue at the 16th NESG summit here in Nigeria. We're hearing from the president, members of his cabinet, and esteemed members of business and a former Chief Justice, talking about the challenges Nigeria has faced, but more importantly, the solutions taking the country forward.